On the Property Show, we have time and again highlighted the desperate need for a real estate regulator in the country. Consider this, the cost of your flat escalates by 10 lakh rupees because your builder decides to change the project layout at his whim and fancy. You were promised possession of your home 3 years back, but you're still waiting, and it's a long, futile wait for justice if you take your builder to court. You protested the halt in construction and stopped paying installments, but ended up with a huge penalty imposed on you by the builder. These are some of the many situations that home buyers find themselves in today. And it all starts when you sign an agreement that violates the basic fundamentals of an equitable contract. Vasudha Sharma dissects how today's standard builder-buyer agreements in real estate operate and how badly stacked against you are they.
India's fair trade regulator, the Competition Commission, has the real estate industry under its investigative scanner. India's largest developer body, CREDAI, and a long list of realty majors are being probed for alleged cartelization and for operating unfair agreements with consumers. So we decided to read the devil in the detail. We're going to study different builder-buy agreements that are used by both big to small developers. If the Competition Commission of India has gone to the extent of calling out a cartel in the developer community, we need to find out what really is abusive and one-sided in these builder-buy agreements. We got hold of a number of builder-buy agreements of real estate companies prominent in the northern markets. Almost all read the same in language, some straightforward, some rather subtle.
All of them will have a differential interest rate. In case of delay of payment by a consumer, they will be given some paltry 1% to 2%, whereas the developers, in case of delay by the consumer, will take almost 15 to 18% as penalty charges. Preferential location charges, they will take that money up front. However, the layout plans can be changed at the sole discretion and arbitrariness of the developer, and there's very little that the consumer can do.
The developer also puts on paper that he has the right, without any prior approval of the buyer, to make structural alterations or additions. This increases the super area, which in turn significantly raises the price of the unit.
There are provisions in the Apartment Act, and there are certain orders by the Honorable High Court also in this regard, that even the Director General Town and Country Planning cannot alter the layouts until and unless he invites the no objections. Unless he invites the objections of the people. So the law is very clear. You don't need to have the consent of the majority. In fact, you need to have the consent of all the owners of the complex.
Many of the common clauses which legal experts claim are abusive in nature read like this. If the buyer wishes to surrender his allotment or fails to pay installments, the developer can forfeit the earnest money, returning only the balance without interest. Developers also added indemnity clause, where they secure themselves and their maintenance agency against any claims or legal proceedings in case of damage or lapses. Only the developer and his appointed maintenance agency is given control of the common areas and facilities, as against the lawful mandate of handing over to the RWA. But clauses claiming force majeure relief let the developer abandon or delay the project without any liabilities. Also, no matter if the unit or building is livable or not, once the developer hands over possession, holding charges of up to 10 rupees per square foot are levied if the buyer doesn't move in. A time is essence clause is only applicable on the purchaser to comply with the payment timelines and says nothing about the seller meeting timelines. At a later stage, if the buyer wants to take the builder to court, the agreement protects him from even that with an arbitration clause.
Arbitration clause actually takes away most of the courts out of the purview of these disputes. Civil courts can't go into it. If there is an arbitration clause, and they usually keep the right to appoint the arbitrator to themselves. And I have first-hand experiences where builders have actually stretched an arbitration matter for so long that the owner lost his interest in the entire thing and he found it futile and he has to give in to the demands.
Legal experts claim these one-sided agreements are also in contravention of the Indian Contracts Act of 1872. CCI's lens on the top 20 developers speaks of the rights of the high-end consumer group. The low-end buyers still remain at the mercy of these abusive contracts in the absence of a government-appointed regulator. With camera person AJ Joseph, Vasudha Sharma, NDTV.
Well, if you compare these builder-buyer agreements, it's an eye-opener as to how prevalent and widespread the practice is amongst developers to impose clauses which are blatantly one-sided. What can be done? Let's find out. KK Sharma, founder KK Sharma Law Offices and former Director General and Head Merger Control and Antitrust Division, CCI, with us today. Also GR Bhatia, Partner Competition Law Practice, Luthra and Luthra Law Offices, and former Additional Director General, CCI MRTP Commission. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me. Mr. Bhatia, first over to you. 20 developers and the biggest lobby group CREDAI under Competition Commission scanner. CCI is alleging they are operating as a cartel. Tell me, in such agreements which are so common across the board, can we then not say that the entire industry is guilty of hedging their interests?
Let me first clarify that I am a counsel representing several builders. So I will keep that information. I would like to disclose that fact to you. And secondly, that merely that there are identical terms and conditions do not necessarily mean that there is collusion amongst the real estate developer. One, that all real estate developers, they have entered gradually. So if some new developer enters into the market, it has to follow the terms and conditions which the existing real estate developers have followed. So merely that there is uniformity or identical or uniform terms and conditions are there in terms of competition law, not necessarily that there is a case of collusion.
Okay. Mr. Sharma, would you agree that CCI's observation that there is some kind of a cartel is not correct, as stated by Mr. Bhatia?
As a matter of fact, when we look at the technical aspect, just because some things are similar does not automatically mean that it is a cartel. So
Okay.
it has to be looked at the touchstone of certain characteristics. However, going by the public perception, it looks like an amusement park where the ride is enjoyed by the owner, not by the people who enter with the ticket. However, this also puts one more responsibility on the head of the Competition Commission of India. They have to ensure freedom of trade for all the participants. So if there are some genuine and good builders who want to give good services, they are lost in this melee. So Commission has to ensure that there is some watchdog and there is some proper gateman at these amusement parks where there is some kind of equity. I'll give you the examples of how this amusement park where the visitor does not enjoy and the owner enjoys. There is tentativeness in almost everything, tentativeness in continuation of the project. Almost all the agreements have that it can be abandoned and the original amount will be returned to the apartment owner. Secondly, there is no, only the layout plans, everything is tentative, floors can be increased. So in this case also this person who is booking the flat does not know. Now this, when we say generally seen, it does not mean, and we cannot say that it is always seen. In some cases there may be some other reasons and that will keep separate. However, broadly if that happens, similarly in your dispute, in case of dispute, generally it is seen that it can be an employee. The owner only decides who will look after it. So when this kind of thing is there, so in that the person who comes, he is not an earnest money deposit. He deposits the money and if he finds the agreement is not appropriate, he has got no authority to withdraw because EMD is forfeited, which is given on the basis of allotment letter.
All right, so it is hugely one-sided. We've established that. What are CCI's powers? I mean, it can only penalize those who have a dominant market position, isn't it? So what about the rest of the builders? I mean, so I just need to understand here that, we are hearing that CCI is looking at it very, has sent out letters, but ultimately, who can it penalize? Yes, it can penalize a DLF. It has a clear market dominant position, Mr. Sharma, but can it penalize a lot many other developers as well?
Yes, as a matter of fact, depends from which perspective CCI looks. We had a case of DLF where penalty was imposed, treating it as one of the dominant, abusing its dominant positions. Means in Gurgaon, you penalize DLF and you let everybody else off. Even suppose there are 5 more builders using the same techniques, you let them off. I was there invited by one of these TV channels, I was asked about it and somebody rightly said, does it mean that you are giving a license to others, other 3 or 4 who are doing the same thing? So that cannot be the intent of the act. What Commission can do is, it can follow Section 3, where practices followed by any association, any group of persons which have got anti-competitive effect can be booked by the Commission. If Commission takes this view, in that case all those people who are following the same practices which are resulting in appreciable adverse effect on competition, they can penalize them together without having to term them as cartel, because which requires a higher degree of evidence.
All right, Mr. Bhatia, because you have a lot of real estate clients as well, I'm sure you'll be able to also validate the claim that builders make that there can never be an industry standard. They're free to have their own, which is open to negotiation with the customer. Do you agree with that? I mean, CCI has huge powers in terms of being able to levy penalties. Can it be a free-for-all market, or do you think even more than CCI, we need a real estate regulator now?
No, let me explain what does the law provides. One, that law prohibits if there is an collusion or cartelization amongst the player in an industry. Second is that is it that a real estate developer is dominant in a particular product and particular geography. So in case the developer is a dominant in a particular category and particular geography, then there are certain conducts which are prohibited by law. You cannot have unfair terms, you cannot have discriminatory conditions, you cannot deny access to the market. So law itself provides what is prohibited in case you happen to be a dominant player. But dominant player in one geography doesn't mean that it is dominant at pan-India level. For example, there are few developers who may be dominant in a particular geography but not necessarily dominant in other geography. That is one aspect. Second is that yes, if there is cartelization, as my friend Mr. Sharma has mentioned, that there is perception that there is common terms and conditions are there, but it is only perception. It is only at best an inference. Unless there is an evidence that there is some understanding or arrangement amongst real estate developers whereby there is a meeting of mind and they have met and decided
Sharma,
same
you
terms.
put your point forward that, sorry, Mr. Bhatia, that there may not be cartelization, maybe we are just inferring it. I just need to understand, can it, when developers claim it's a free market and therefore they should be allowed to decide on the buyer-seller agreement as they wish to, is that correct?
Absolutely. There is a complete option with the buyer as well as there is a real estate developer, so long the agreements are entered into voluntarily, without any coercion, without any pressure. Yes, so far as competition law is concerned, it's a voluntary agreement which is entered into between the two parties. For in case the government, as government is contemplating that they want to regulate the real estate area, then certainly a real estate regulator can deal with such type of grievances and complaints.
So, Mr. Sharma, hearing Mr. Bhatia, this is what I can say, that the amusement park is going to be open only for the owners, then why even bring in anybody else? It's just going to be a one-sided ride for the owners, isn't it? I mean, if we are conceding here that every developer, it's a free market and developers can continue to instigate the same buyer-seller agreement, and so be it. Buyer has to just take it or lump it.
This is the present situation, as Mr. Bhatia also said and agreed, that the government, if it wants, can bring a regulator. So in any economy, in every sector, there are times when you let things go in open market. When we realize that the market is not functioning well, then you bring the regulators. So perhaps if too many grievances are accumulating, and in many instances it's happening that freedom is not being used appropriately, CCI may take the first step and thereafter there may be a full-fledged regulator.
So you are saying that, okay, so the beginning made by CCI, can it be, what do you think can be the outcome of it? Because, you know, by the looks of it, a regulator isn't going to happen in a hurry. Well, let's all be very clear, there are political compulsions why a regulator is not going to come in the country, at least in the next 12 to 24 months. So tell me, what can CCI do and what is the way out, or can it be of any relief to the buyer? Mr. Sharma.
CCI, if it treats this, I am not sure under which section the report of DG has come. If it is under section 3, they treat it as a practice carried on by an association of persons, and they say that this is practice is uniform in that event they can penalize them, and that will become a trend setter. Then all the people will have to be careful, and maybe the government may take a cue, they can be a regulator in future. That will also give protection to those builders who are not indulging in these practices. So that will discriminate in the market between good builders and builders who are following these practices, and that will provide a freedom of trade to the market participant. That is one of the obligations of the Competition Commission. It will also provide relief to the consumers who are suffering at the hands of unscrupulous builders.
Can it also enforce the model buyer-seller agreement on, let's say, every dominant developer in a certain geography? If you can divide it geographically, that should give a lot of leeway to CCI, isn't it, Mr. Sharma?
That will have a lot of legal issues and complications. I have got my doubts and reservations for enforcing such a model code of agreement only on dominant players. And other than dominant players will have a lot of avenues to challenge that.
Okay.
So I have got my own doubts on that.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Sharma, Mr. Bhatia. It's been an interesting discussion. We'll keep bringing you, of course, this fight of the buyers against developers. No, we are not anti-developers. In fact, on this show, we are constantly recommending projects and the best real estate projects to buy in your money. Our only debate and discussion here is that the agreements have to stop being one-sided. You cannot just have everything stacked against the buyer, and that's a fight we are going to continue to have on this channel and push for a real estate regulator.